What's going on YouTube? It's Tej back again with another video, and today I'm giving you a reaction to Goat House's latest NFL mock draft, and hopefully you all enjoyed today's video. If you do, hit that like button, it would help me and my channel out a ton. And if you're new to the channel, want to see more football content, more draft content in specific, just hit that big red subscribe button. And of course, most importantly, join for a conversation down in the comment section. I respect the absolute mess out of the Goat House, Tom Downey from chat, anybody who's willing to put their name next to a mock draft and endure the criticisms. My last mock has 8,000 some odd views. Thank you all again very much. I really do appreciate that support. Half the comments are telling me they love it for their team. Half the comments tell me they hate it. Goat House has got even more subscribers, even more views on his mock, so I can only imagine some of the things that he has to deal with in that respect. So I am not going to criticize the person or the mock. I'm just going to talk about who I think might go a little higher, who might be falling, kind of talk about the fits a little bit. And I'd love to have your thoughts as well. This is kind of a catalyst for a draft discussion down below. So give me your thoughts in the comment section. And let's go ahead and jump right into it. I do apologize. I'm up in the top right corner, and I was trying not to cover up Goat House's face, give him his shine, and try not to get bad screenshots of him as well, so hopefully there's nothing too bad there. I am going to cover up some of the schools with where I'm at. I figured, though, at this point, most people know the name and the position in school and such, but if you don't know, just a comment, and I will let you know. But the Goat House has go ahead and made the move. A couple people have done it. Trevor Sycamore from Pro Football Focus did it as well. Evan Neal's the number 1 overall pick. I think it makes some sense. I think part of the reason I might hold on to the idea of getting an edge rusher is because Caleb Von Chason hasn't been great, though I do think there is still something to tap into there. If you were to pair Josh Allen with Hutchinson or Thibodeaux, and they were to hit their high side of variance, their upside, that pass rush duo would be elite, and it kind of goes back to the Bengals argument I had last year. I thought the Bengals should take Ja'Marr Chase because him, Higgins, and Boyd gave you an elite wide receiver room, and something that not a lot of teams have. Like, there's wide receivers that are elite out in the world. There's not a whole lot of teams with elite wide receiver rooms, and that's what the Bengals could do. So I kind of like the idea of creating a nice elite edge duo. But that said, we'll see how free agency shapes out. If, Cam Robinson's not back, Juwan Taylor's been a bit of a disappointment, then yeah, tackle has to kind of be an area that you address. So Evan Neal makes a ton of sense there. And that leaves Aiden Hutchinson on the board for number 2, stays in state. I'm sure that'd make a lot of Detroit Lions fans happy, some Michigan fans happy as well. Like that fit, think he'd be a good addition to that defense. And then Kayvon Thibodeaux, I think this might be the best case scenario really for the Texans. Sure, you can have Evan Neal fall down here. You have an elite tackle duo with Tunsil on the left, Neal on the right. Definitely nothing to be disappointed with if you're a Houston fan if that comes to fruition. But I think this team really is lacking any sort of foundational piece at an edge rush spot. Like, who on that roster would you say in 5 years, if this team's competing to get to a Super Bowl conversation or in the playoff mix, who on this team right now would be a part of that conversation in 3 to 5 years time as a legitimate starting edge rusher that you'd be like, yeah, they're good here? Nobody really comes to mind. So I think Hutchinson or Thibodeaux is probably the best case scenario, in my opinion, for the Houston Texans. Then Ike Ekwonu going for the Jets. It's tough where New York's at because, I had Derek Stingley Jr. in my last mock, and every Jets fan, except for one guy, appreciate that one guy, tell me they hate Derek Stingley at 4, thinking he's going to be a bust. The next D. Miller, somebody said that, and that's a pretty funny comp, D. Milner, because obviously that didn't work out. But I don't really love Ike Ekwonu here. You played this year without Mekhi Becton. The offensive line still wasn't the worst part of your roster, right? But you get Becton back. Barry Tucker started playing better as the year went on. I think that left side's really set. And then I think from center to right tackle, you can patch it up with some veteran players. Maybe you make a move, make a trade for another veteran that is reliable. I think that's just a better use of that asset. So then it comes down to, I would go Stingley here at 4. A lot of Jets fans not loving that ideal because he's had his injuries and hasn't been the same guy since 2019, and I understand that. So maybe Kyle Hamilton enters the conversation here, but kind of comes down to how early is too early to take a safety. We'll kind of talk about another player in a similar realm here in a minute when we get to the Giants, because there's people talking about Tyler Linderbaum being the best thing the Giants can do at 5 or 7, even though he's a center, and I think that's a little too early to take that position. But Ike Ekwonu, I wouldn't be disappointed with this pick if he went to the Jets. Charles Cross, the next pick, I think this would be fantastic for the Giants. Move Andrew Thomas over to the right side. If you have the tackle set, you can figure out the interior. And this team definitely does need to fix up that offensive line, especially if we're going to run it back with Daniel Jones. And then the Carolina Panthers go Kenny Pickett at 6. That's kind of it's an interesting microcosm that you look at with the Panthers, because let's say they did take Kenny Pickett here. They used the 6th overall pick on a quarterback a year after trading a 2, 4, and a 6 for another that they're now going to see not as their at least full year starter. And then if you think about it, it's okay, they get 4 picks for Kenny Pickett, essentially. 4 picks to find a starter. You could look at it as throwing darts to find an option, which is something I've said teams should do. This feels like the extreme of that and the least efficient way about going through it. Kenny Pickett in and of himself here at 6. I'm not a huge Kenny Pickett guy. I think right now he's probably my QB3, but he is probably the most pro-ready of the bunch, and I can see Matt Rule saying, I'm on a hot seat. I need someone who can step in and be better than Darnold and help us win games, because otherwise I'm out of the building. So I can see where Pickett makes some sense there for Carolina. I'm not necessarily thrilled about this pick, but it also comes down to if Ikem Ekwonu, Evan Neal, and Charles Cross are off the board, you can take another corner. There's only but so many options really left on the table then for Carolina. Kyle Hamilton, the pick at number 7 for the New York Giants. And this is where, especially I think, Giants fans, I could see the argument, and football guys in general, could be like Tyler Linderbaum's a top 7 player. Take away position, he's a top 7 player in this draft. I think there's an argument to be had that, if you don't weigh position value, might be one of the most, or at least he's one of the most 7 safest players to take in this draft. I think you can plug and play, start him, and he'll be a 10-year starter. Maybe he won't be anything more than that, but he'll be a 10-year starter or something along those lines. It just comes down to how early is too early to take a center. Kind of breaches in on that conversation we were talking about earlier with the Jets at 4, right? Is safety too early to take at 4? Is center too early to take at 7? It's to be contemplated. Here we have the safety going at 7 to the Giants, and I actually did hear a little bit of this. I tried to keep it pretty clean from what I heard from the Goat House's takes, but the idea that Logan Ryan's getting older and Jabril Peppers about to be a free agent, Kyle Hamilton and Xavier McKinney is a 1-2 dynamic, totally fluid safety duo where they could both do a whole lot and play free and strong interchangeably. That creates a whole lot of mismatches for the offense, or at least you don't know where those two guys are going to be from start of the play to the end of the play, and that creates some headaches for quarterbacks. So I'm kind of intrigued by how that could play out, and that tandem in and of itself, but I feel like edge is a little bit bigger of a need. Or if you did want to reach, go IOL. If you went tackle and then Linderbaum, you got to feel better about that offensive line, right? So I wouldn't totally hate that, but then I kind of feel like I'm going back to where I was talking about with the Jets, where you already got a couple of young guys. I'd rather see some veterans across that unit to just add to some of that experience factor into the mix. And I don't want to have it being too young. So I don't know, I'm kind of going back on myself there. If they went Hamilton at 7, I wouldn't hate it. Jordan Davis here at 8. This is probably about as high as I've seen him go in any mock. And I think this makes some sense, and this is another one of those picks I heard him justify. Pairing him next to Grady Jarrett. And actually, in my last mock, I had at the back end of round 2, Travis Jones, I believe, was the nose I gave to Atlanta. I think that makes some sense. And my argument was, hey, if you put a nose tackle that's just his role is to stop the run, allows Grady Jarrett to focus up on the pass or pass rush part of his aspect and of his game, and he is really good at that. And I know last year was a down year, but when he is playing well, he is right there with Chris Jones, Cam Hayward, Jeffrey Simmons now in that mix. So this is the same point that I made in that video just a whole lot earlier. My problem with Jordan Davis is, again, how early is too early to take a nose? Can you do something where you take a different player? Like if this is my mock, Derek Stingley Jr. makes a ton of sense here. And then you go nose in round 2, whether it's Devonta Wyatt or it is Travis Jones. I think that's to be in play here, but you could see it the other way around and say Jordan Davis is a massive human being. He's built to stop the run. And then in round 2, that's when you go add another corner to be playing opposite of AJ Terrell. You add some edge rush there. So obviously it's interchangeable. And that's what makes draft season really fun, is because there's 1,000 different routes that you could take, and there's none that's necessarily right or wrong. On to the next screen, we see Matt Corral taken off the board by the Denver Broncos. And the Panthers and the Broncos are both teams I think right now are probably trying to do anything they can to get a veteran quarterback. Like Deshaun Watson is open to going to Carolina. I think they're going to try to push for that pretty heavily. Same can be said about Denver making a push for Watson, especially if Rodgers is saying, hey, breaking news, literally right before I'm recording this video, Brady's retired or potentially retired. I could see Rodgers wanting to stay in the NFC, so maybe Watson's their play. If not, if he still wants to move, Rodgers certainly in play after they hire Nathaniel Hackett. So I think veteran quarterback's probably the route for those two teams, but if they don't get one, sure, pick it at 6, makes some sense, and Corral here at 9. Corral's kind of interesting. I don't think they're the same player, but Matt Corral makes me feel like his floor is equal to that of Derek Carr. Like Derek Carr this year played like a top 10 quarterback. He was one of the better QBs in football, and he was a big part of the reason the Raiders made the playoffs. But in the years past, 2-3 years ago, he was right around that top 16, top 14 conversation. I feel like that's Matt Corral's floor. Like he will minimum be an okay league average starting quarterback because he can move the pocket. He is mobile. He has a strong arm, and you've seen that progression at Ole Miss. Now that said, he could also be a whole lot better than a top 16, top 14 quarterback, and that's really what Denver would be banking in on and hoping that Nathaniel Hackett kind of show him the ways, how him and Rodgers work. Maybe that rubs off between Hackett and Corral, and then you have the rest of the roster in place. And this would also be an interesting pick And Denver did go rookie quarterback, right? They already have $40+ million in cap space, a lot to play around with. And then if a rookie, cost-controlled quarterback, and that is really interesting to see what they would use that money on, not only this year but in years to come. Try to keep them as one of the best rosters overall outside of the quarterback position across the entire league. So that'd be really interesting, and I wouldn't hate that if they strike out on veteran quarterbacks. Devin Lloyd at 10. This is not what I've seen a whole lot. And you look at Robert Saleh, right? He had his Fred Warner, and really that defense took a whole new level. And even before that, you could date the beginnings of that cover 3 tree back to Bobby Wagner with Seattle. So that middle linebacker spot in that defense, those Saleh's kind of shifted it to more of cover 4 last year in San Francisco, this year in New York. That middle linebacker role is still really important, and obviously Devin Lloyd's fantastic in coverage, maybe not to the same ilk that Fred Warner is, but still fantastic in space, uber athletic, can blitz, which obviously adds some extra benefit, right? Especially if this team doesn't go edge in the top 10 with either of their picks, and you're hoping Carl Lawson gets back to form. You could use Devin Lloyd as that interior pressure, put some extra work on the plate of centers and guards and create some mismatches there. I'm intrigued by that as well. Plus, it'll help you in the run game. So don't hate this pick. I'm kind of leaning more towards Drake London here at 10 for the Jets, but if they went Lloyd, I can see why they did it. Then Sam Howell here, the Washington football team. In a lot of ways, as much as Malik Willis is like the guy in this draft with upside, right? He's the person who, if everything works right, has the highest ceiling of anybody. I don't think Howell is all that far off. Now, he's not quite Willis, but I think there's a lot to work with here. And part of it is because I've seen Howell with an ideal situation, right? He's playing with NFL caliber running backs, wide receivers, and an okay offensive line in front of him. And then this past year, the ACC was down. You would have wished you a little bit more, but he was playing with not a lot of pro-ready, talent on the outside or in the backfield, and that offensive line was pretty bad. So I've seen him doing it both. And you've seen him win in different ways because of that. When he had a lot of talent, he was bombing it deep, big plays everywhere for UNC. This year, when he had to carry the load, he did a lot with his legs and trying to churn out the game one first down at a time. And I gotta like that I've seen both from him. Does have a monster cannon for an arm, an absolute howitzer, can be mobile, can play through contact. Him and Corral both, I think, are welcoming of contact, which is nice plus for a quarterback nowadays, considering how many hits you'll take both in and outside the pocket, on the run, in front of the line of scrimmage, behind it, all of that. So I'm a big Sam Howell guy, and he's kind of climbing up my QB rankings as the days go by. Nakobe Dean to the Vikings. So it's interesting. Lloyd and Dean, these are different spots than I normally see them. But for the Vikings, Anthony Barr is a free agent. I wouldn't be surprised if they move on from Michael Pierce. So having someone else in there try to pick up that run-stopping ability, which the Vikings, they've been pretty banged up on the defensive side. They haven't necessarily been good against the run the last couple of years, and that was a big disappointment. This past year, I really thought with Tomlinson and Pierce, at least if they were healthy, with Kendricks and Barr, they would be, and Harrison Smith, of course, they would be a pretty solid run-stopping unit. Well, it wasn't great. I guess it wasn't putrid, but it wasn't to the level that I was anticipating. So Dean as your Anthony Barr replacement, I can see some value to that. But for me, though, the cornerback room is really bad, and edge rusher, especially if they don't bring back Danielle Hunter, a big need for this team. So I think there's just a couple more valuable positions maybe Minnesota could target here at 12. Garrett Wilson, the Browns, won't stay on this one long. You've seen this in a ton of mocks. This one makes a ton of sense. Natural route runner, great separator. And his explosiveness and ability to break or get out of his break is one of the best in this class. And I think he's still wide receiver 1 for me. We'll see how the combine shakes out between him and London. It's certainly going to be close. But this wide receiver class overall is starting to grow on me a little bit. So definitely like Wilson. Keep him in state and a big area of need for the Cleveland Browns. So I like that a lot. David Ojabo. It's interesting when you look at this Ravens scheme. What are they going to run post-Wink Martindale? If it's a traditional 3-4 and you have Ojabo at one rush outside linebacker spot opposite of Odafe Oweh, minimal. That's one of the scariest, get off the bus tandems in the league. Those two dudes were built in a lab, so that in and of itself provides some value. But they're also just uber athletic, and obviously they don't play Lamar Jackson because he's on their team, but in a time in the NFL where mobile quarterbacks are becoming more and more popular, and it's hard to take quarterbacks that are just straight statues, having guys who can contain or at least catch up to quarterbacks with that much athleticism, obviously a big plus. But we've seen this Ravens team year after year with player after player. This year is a great example. I did not think they would get this much, not only quality play, but big moment play from Odafe Oweh. But he definitely superseded my expectations there. And again, that's just the Baltimore way. They have a way of being a player production and progression factory. And who says they can't do that with David Ojabo, a guy who's still learning the game of football? I could see him stepping in and having a lot of success, especially with Oweh on the other side. That too could be in unbelievable pass rush tandem. Then we get to the Eagles for a couple of picks. I'm on Sauce Gardner. I think this would be a tremendous pick. We'll see what happens with Jonathan Gannon if he comes back to the DC or if he gets the Texans job or any other job he might be interviewing for. But I think Gardner would be a tremendous fit. Opposite of Darius Slay, a very soft zone, but because he is big and he has those long arms, he can get his hands on football a little bit more, even though that is a relatively conservative defense. But it's also somebody that, hey, Darius Slay's not going to play forever. Gardner could be eventual CB1, so I like that pick a lot. And Treylon Burks, him and Drake London, he's got Burks going before London. Daniel Jeremiah had Burks before London. I understand what is to be desired about Burks. Great athlete, and he was able to move to the outside this year at Arkansas and really kept that team relevant for longer than they have been for a long time, right? Like, they were undefeated until they played Georgia midway through the season, and that is a lot more than most Arkansas teams can say about themselves. And he did not have good quarterback play, so maybe it's a spot here where obviously Hurts is a step up. I know he's not the most accurate quarterback, but he is a step up compared to Arkansas quarterbacks. But huge catch radius. I like this fit. I had London going here in my last mock. That big body archetype, I think, is exactly what this wide receiver room needs for Philadelphia. Make the life with Jalen Hurts a little easier. So I like both these picks. Two big body guys that I think would fit both the offense and defensive schemes and point of attack really well. On to the LA Chargers and Devonta Wyatt. This is as high as I've seen him go. But I'm telling you, there's really not that much separation between him and Jordan Davis, just based off their on-field production and their grades from experts and sources and scouts and whatnot. It's just the fact Jordan Davis is 6'6", 350 or whatever he's going to measure in at. He's a massive human being that naturally kind of captures your attention. Devonta Wyatt did a whole lot of the same and was nearly just as good, maybe just legitimately as good at it as Jordan Davis was. So I like this value, and this is kind of where you get to the Chargers here at 17, and a lot of Chargers fans want to see Jordan Davis because he'll eat up blocks, fits that defense well. You can continue to play too high and limit big plays. I get all that. The reason I didn't have that, and I went Jameson Williams at 17, it's just a more valuable position, and for the idea that you can then get Devonta Wyatt in the second round. Maybe his name's catching a whole lot of buzz and he'll sneak in the first round, and maybe that changes your point of attack. This could also be a good linebacker spot. I could see the Chargers going something in the way of linebacker. Maybe if Devin Lloyd or Nakobe Dean's there, they take one of those guys. Devonta Wyatt, Travis Jones in the second, and then wide receiver like a Sky Moore, a Wan'Dale Robinson. Give me that speed element that I was talking about with Jameson Williams. I think would be a good addition to this offense. Maybe that's the way you go about it. Go wide receiver later, get an all-around linebacker, then a nose, then you go get a playmaker. Again, draft season. There's really no wrong answer. I think that's a really attractive route. Maybe I'll do these, ideal 3-round mocks for each and every team. If you'd be interested in that, let me know. Kind of fun to play around with who I think would be a great fit, and especially in each round. Malik Willis at 18, and while I'm looking at it, let's go ahead and talk about Carson Strong here at 20. I think both these teams are probably going to be chasing quarterbacks, especially if they don't get a veteran one. Obviously, with Sean Payton retiring, quote unquote, or retiring question mark. We'll see if he comes back. But with him no longer with New Orleans, this changes how you kind of look at the QB position. But obviously, you're coming off the heels of Breeze and Peyton. Why not go take the home run hit? Malik Willis makes some sense. He's the guy with the highest upside. But again, I kind of like the idea of switching these two. I had Strong going to the Saints in my last mock. I don't know if he'll go in the first round. He didn't play in his bowl game. That typically is a sign that his agent and sources around the league are saying, hey, you're good. Don't go out there and risk injury. We like you. You have a good stock right now. So we'll see. And obviously, this is a guy who, Strong that is, will probably tear up the combine when he's throwing to wide open wide receivers, no defenders around. He's the best pure passer in this draft, so I think he'll look great in Indy there, and in his pro day for that matter. The reason I think it'd be a better fit for these two players in specific, and the organization for that matter, switching the two, Carson Strong, again, best pure passer. His weakness, his kryptonite, his lack of mobility and his knee injuries. Well, the Saints have one of the best offensive lines in football. So that is a spot, one of the few spots you could say in this draft where he could go and you would feel okay with him standing behind that offensive line and him playing like a statue, because more often than not, he'll be protected and have a clean pocket in front of him. Willis, on the other hand, if he went to Pittsburgh, it helps hide one of their biggest weaknesses. Obviously, the Steelers are going to ideally address the offensive line in some way, shape, or form, and it won't be the exact same, but let's just say it was the exact same 5 as it was last year. Having a Malik Willis is a lot more ideal in that spot than Carson Strong. Because if it's Carson Strong behind that offensive line, it's pretty much the same thing we saw with Big Ben this year. It's really not going to look all that different. So Willis in Pittsburgh could hide that weak offensive line. Strong in New Orleans might be in one of the best spots for him, given that offensive line in front of him and allowing him to just sit in the pocket and deliver the football all across the yard. So I think both these teams could go quarterback. I'm kind of more intrigued if you were to flip them around. In between Willis and Strong is George Karlaftis at 19. It feels a little low. And I remember hearing the Goat House talking about he doesn't think he's going to be uber or great off the chart athletic ability. We'll see. Maybe not with straight line speed. I don't think he'll be a guy with a blazing 40, but what he'll put up on the bench, this guy is uber strong, and you see it the second you look at him play. And then I think the 3-cone, those agility drills, the short shuttle, I think that'll show this guy kind of has that Bosa way about him. Like straight line speed, not their game, but strong, flexible, and agile. They can get around tackles, and they can also work through tackles. So I think once we see those numbers, you'll see Karlaftis shoot up his board a little bit in that top 10, 15 range that I've seen in most mocks. To 21, Christian Harris. He's been a really interesting player to watch throughout this entire process. Back before college football and NFL season got underway, I was like, yeah, this is probably a first-round linebacker coming from Alabama, good athlete. Adds up. It sounds like a first-rounder to me. And then as the year went on, he was kind of underwhelming, not great in the run game, not awesome in coverage, really just kind of there as an extra pass rusher in a lot of ways, coming from the middle. And that he did provide value with. So I was like, okay, maybe a day 2 guy. Maybe he could turn into what really Kenneth Murray should have been, right? If you take Kenneth Murray in the second round for the Chargers and you have that mindset of, okay, he's going to be a blitzing linebacker, your expectations are a whole lot different than this is our sideline-to-sideline guy that we're trading back to the first round to get. And I think if you have the expectation like the Patriots here of Christian Harris can be our next Dont'a Hightower, okay, you have the proper expectation that he can thrive in that role, and I think he would be stellar. But he was fantastic against Georgia in the national championship game. So his stock clearly back on the rise. I think he'll be in this late first-round conversation, and I think he'd be, again, an excellent fit for the Patriots as that Hightower replacement. I think this is the perfect place for him to play, at least if you were to make that decision right now. Derek Stingley, all the way down to 22. He might be the most polarizing player in this draft class, especially outside the quarterback position. I still see him as a top 10 player. I know we haven't seen him be the same guy since 2019, but you've seen the upside, and that upside's a shutdown corner. How often do you see shutdown corners available, right? If you have the chance to get a guy who can be a number 1 lockdown guy, take away an option or a half of a field, you jump all over that, even if it was just like he might be. That's what you have with Derek Stingley. He's going to be uber athletic. You're not worried about any of those. Now the injury concerns, yes, a bit of an issue there. And he hasn't had that same level of play since 2019. But you've seen it, and every single prospect in this class, every single prospect in general, has their, well, if this happens, they're a bust. Or this could happen, and you won't get any value out of them. So if that's the case, and there's risk behind every single pick you make, why not swing for the fences? And especially here, if you're the Raiders at 22, I really don't think he makes it to 22, but if this were to come to fruition, this guy we've seen be a shutdown number 1 who has the athletic measurables to be one of the best corners in football, you sprint the card in, especially considering you just had to cut Damon Arnett. You're lacking not only secondary players in general, but young, upside type of players in the secondary. I think they would be all over this, and I think this would be a great spot for the Raiders to find themselves in. Then Roger McCreary, the next pick, if you see my other mocks, man-heavy scheme with Vance Joseph, assuming he doesn't get the Dolphins job. I think this would be a tremendous fit for Roger McCreary, one of the best man-coverage corners in college football and in this draft in general. So it fills the area of need, great scheme fit, and as the year went on, you started to see the Cardinals' defense kind of regress to the mean. The team in general kind of regressed towards the mean. You add some talent to that defense, I think they'll be right back in that playoff conversation. Also, we'll see if they keep Chandler Jones, because if not, edge certainly in play here. Kenyon Green of the Cowboys, this might be the best place for him to go, just given his versatility. This is the place that will maximize that the most. I'm kind of intrigued by the idea of, let's say he fell to the Bengals, and since he said you're going to play right tackle, how much better does he get at right tackle, right? Like, becoming the master of, or the jack of all trades, the master of none, what happens when you turn that player into a starting right tackle, and that's all they have to focus on? Do they become a master of that? I mean, obviously we'll find out in a few years, but Kenyon Green, he could be the starting left guard on day 1, but also Tyron Smith gets hurt, you can slide him over to left tackle. Or if you want, Lyle Collins could do that, and you can slide Kenyon Green over to right tackle. If Zach Martin gets hurt, you can play him at right guard. That's the exciting thing about Kenyon Green, is no matter what happens across your offensive line, when injuries strike, you have a guy who can fill in and be helpful there. But he also can just be plug-and-play starter at whatever position you feel like you need and upgrade that position. For the Bengals, it's right tackle or it's guard. For the Cowboys, it's left guard. I think there's a lot of upside there and a lot of desirability in someone who can be a starter right away, but also, when push comes to shove, can be a Band-Aid just about anywhere across the offensive line. So really like that pick there for the Cowboys, who have had years, derailed because of, offensive lines not staying healthy. And last but not least, here are the final 8 picks in the latest Goat House mock draft. Again, really appreciate him doing this, and hopefully he doesn't mind me reacting to it. Trent McDuffie to the Bills. I think this makes a ton of sense. My last mock, I had him going IOL. I think it actually was Kenyon Green or Linderbaum, either one. I think this makes a fair amount of sense. Corner and IOL are probably the 2 areas you look at in this team and say, okay, they definitely can get better there. Especially for corner, you can add depth, right? You're going to get Trey White back. That's obviously good. I like Levi Wallace, but it's pretty clear now he's, a 2 max. But if he's your 3 to 4 rotational guy, it's probably a little better for him. So if you have McDuffie, this guy who is a little bit shorter but not small, right? Still right around 200 pounds, can pressure at the line of scrimmage. Him and Trey White as your starters. Levi Wallace is your rotational guy. Taron Johnson as your nickel. I like that overall. This could also be a nose, right? If Jordan Davis starts falling, I could see where, like we talked about with the Falcons, you pair a run-stopping nose tackle to allow Grady Jarrett to focus on being a pass rusher. You can say the same thing here with the Bills, especially considering Ed Oliver hasn't really hit all the expectations set before him. So you could go run-stopping nose, let Ed Oliver focus on being a pass rusher, and maybe that gets more value out of him. It's kind of just an interesting idea of, like, who can we take in the first round that might make a potential star on our team better? Turn him into a superstar, or turn a regular player into a star, because we think that's what they can be. It's kind of an interesting way of using your first rounder. Jameson Williams to the Titans. I actually really like this fit. Julio Jones, obviously a little bit of a shell of himself, not the same guy he once was. And I think maybe the knock on Williams will be, as this process goes out, you didn't see him do a whole lot in that 10 to 19 yard range, or really you could branch out 10 to 25 yard range. It was get him the ball in space, at the line of scrimmage, screen plays, things like that. He's great after the catch because he's electric, he's shifty, he can move just as much as he can move north to south and 0 to 60 and as fast as anyone in the country. His agility and ability to work horizontally, as good as it got, and as good as it gets in this draft class. But he's also a guy who, if he only ran routes 30-plus yards down the field, he'd be pretty damn good at it. And he would have a role in the offense, and he would open up a lot of things for someone like A.J. Brown or Westbrook-Ikhine, who make a living over the middle of the field in that 10 to 19-yard range. So I really like this addition to the offense. Williams and Brown, both as yak players, different types, right? Williams, the explosive guy. Brown, kind of that tank, that force. And then Williams is a deep threat to open up the middle of the field, make A.J. Brown's life that much easier. Maybe you get more out of Julio Jones because of it. I think that's a really, really nice fit. I'm starting to really like the idea of going wide receiver for Tennessee in future mocks. Chris Olave to the Bucs. I mentioned earlier Brady might be retiring now. I'm getting texts from a friend saying he might not be. I don't know. We'll see. We'll let this play out. If Brady's back, this, I think, makes a ton of sense. You clearly saw without AB and Chris Godwin at the end of the regular season in the playoffs, they were missing an extra playmaker. Scotty Miller, Jalen Darden, Tyler Johnson, all left a lot to be desired. And I doubt Gronk comes back, honestly. They were relying on him to get some chunk plays, Mike Evans to keep them around against the Rams. So I could see adding a smooth, big play, just a nice, all well-rounded wide receiver. Someone who can step into an offense and be your number 2 wide receiver right away. I think Chris Olave makes a ton of sense. Granted, I do think Tampa Bay re-signs Chris Godwin, but I can still see them going, even if they do that, still going wide receiver, just because there's not a whole lot of holes left on the roster anywhere else. That said, Brady's retired. Obviously, QB is in play here. Bernard Raymond at 28 to the Packers. I think he goes a lot higher than this. His name, I think, is the one I've heard the most buzz around the last couple of weeks. People are loving him. Huge frame, moves really well. I think he'll test well athletically, both straight line speed for an offensive lineman, agility, and strength. I think he'll knock it out of the park there. A lot of good praise there, and he's one of the highest graded tackles per Pro Football Focus. Granted, I know in the MAC with Central Michigan, but the MAC's not completely terrible, but obviously it would have been a lot more impressive if he was like Charles Cross to it in the SEC. But I think Raymond's going to move up a lot of people's boards into that, 16 to 24 range in the draft, at least as I see it right now. Tyler Linderbaum to the Bengals at 29. I think this would be an excellent value pick for the Bengals. You get a starter right away and improve one of the weakest areas on your roster. Again, the tough part with Linderbaum is there going to be a team that says, he's a top 10 player in this class, I don't care about position, we need a center, let's get him. Or a team that might say, well, he could be a starting guard, or excuse me, a starting center, and we need that. He also could be a guard for us, like, maybe a team picking in the top 5 to 7, like the Giants, right? He could play center, and he'd be an upgrade. Or maybe he could play guard, he'd be an upgrade. People see him maybe a little too small to play guard. If you win a wrestling match with Tristan Wirfs, look up Tristan Wirfs' size, weight, measurables. If you can take that guy to the ground, I think you're strong enough. Granted, I know there's a lot of technique in wrestling. There's more to it. There's some beauty and some art behind it that makes it easier to take down someone bigger than you. That said, Tristan Wirfs sounds like he has a wrestling background, so for Linderbaum to still be able to do that, very impressive. So I think the strength is not going to be too big of an issue. We'll see at the combine. Trevor Penning, right here at 30 to the Dolphins. I know Miami fans have been rooting for San Francisco to lose in the playoffs. It hasn't happened. Sorry. But pretty much this is as low as this pick's going to get. It's only going to get 2 spots lower, potentially. But I think this is a great pick. And honestly, the Dolphins should just use as many resources as possible. They have a good amount of cap room. They have a fair amount of draft assets. Throw darts at the wall. Try to get as many players in. Find a 5 that works across that offensive line, especially if you're sticking with Tua. I'd love to be able to see him stand behind a pocket that can actually keep him upright for more than 2.5 seconds to see if this offense, what it actually looks like. Because I don't think the RPO is where they want to stay and run 100% of their offense through. I like to see him set back into a 5-7 step drop and bomb it deep for Jalen Waddle running a deep post or, whatever. I'd like to see Jalen Waddle used in that type of role. We didn't get to see a whole lot of that in his rookie year, and he has that capability. So Penning, I'm all here for it for the Dolphins. Drake London at 31. This is... I think he's definitely off the board at this point, at least for where we are in the process right now. Huge catch radius, massive hands, learned how to, I don't want to say learned, but proved, showcased that he could win both on the inside and the out. And I think he's one of those players with a high floor because minimum, you throw him in the slot, you can use him basically as like a kicked out tight end, like a Jared Cook almost, and let him go to town on smaller cornerbacks or just potentially some teams nickel or corner 3 and they're just sticking him in the nickel. I think there's some mismatches for him to win there. He's also just a different body type than Amon-Ra St. Brown. Really came on down the end of the year. Amon-Ra St. Brown sub 6 foot, and I think he really probably projects the best as a slot guy. So, but granted, he did have experience at USC playing on the outside. Also a fun connection, both Trojans. So that's cool. Both those guys have the versatility to play inside and out. And when I had London going to the Eagles, in my mock, I was talking about, hey, Devonta Smith, you can play him inside, out, get favorable matchups. You do the same thing with Drake London. I like that idea of, like, if you get a good creative offensive coordinator and play caller, moving wide receivers around in different positions, what the Packers do with Devontae Adams, what a lot of good teams do with their good wide receivers. Just adding that versatility of having players at different spots, creating mismatches, something that I find intriguing. Obviously not someone who has a play sheet in front of them, right? So, also, it's just a different body type, right? Like I said, Amon-Ra's smaller, sub 6 foot. There's plus sides to what he brings to the game. He's really shifty, and he's quicker than someone like a London is. He'll probably be in the 4.6, 4.7s when it comes to straight line 40. We'll see what the 3-cone looks like. I have no idea what to anticipate it would look like. But obviously, Amon-Ra St. Brown could win in the red zone, but you throw a fade back corner to Drake London, you're feeling a little bit better about it than Amon-Ra St. Brown. So just getting a different body type and making the lives of whoever might be the future quarterback for this team a little bit easier. And then Andrew Booth Jr. here at 32. I think it's great value. I think a lot of teams are going to be happy with the cornerbacks they get in the first, second, third, and so on and so forth. So I think there's a lot of talent in the cornerback position in this class, and yeah, I think a lot of teams are going to be really happy. And here, just a really nice value for the Chiefs. And, a couple of years after they went running back at the end of round 1, and obviously there's a lot of flack for making that decision, especially, once this team, at the end of, not this past season, but the year before, the offensive line was really brittle. They looked like they needed a cornerback. A lot of people were saying, well, you should have used that pick on something else. Maybe it prevents another need from coming to arise. This is one of those moves where this team has some holes, including cornerbacks. Not only does it help you now, but it addresses something that you can prevent becoming a bigger issue down the line by adding depth and rotating guys in. Because Rashad Fenton's been fine, and L'Jarius Sneed's he's a pretty good player, and they have guys in that room. And I anticipate they'll probably bring back Tyrann Mathieu as this strong safety nickel corner hybrid. Adding more bodies will never be a bad thing if you're talking about corners, wide receivers, offensive line, pass rush help, things of that nature. But that's going to do it for my reaction to the latest Goat House NFL mock draft. Tell me what you thought about it down in the comment section, both his picks, who you think went too high, who you think fell too low, and also my analysis. Give me some of your takeaways from my takeaways. That's kind of fun, takeaways squared there. But hopefully you all enjoyed today's video. If you did, hit that like button. It would help me and my channel a ton. If you're new to the channel and want to see more football and draft content, just hit that big red subscribe button. That's going to do it for me. Hope you all have a fantastic rest of your day. And until next time, my name is Tej, and I'm signing off.